Доброго дня, це медіа-центр Україна Одеса. Продовжуємо нашу роботу. Нам вдалося підключитися до прес-офіцера Херсону Дмитра Плетенчука. Він зараз з нами на прямому зв'язку. Спитаємо його.
Afternoon, we resume our work. Now we have the press officer of Kherson. You would like to ask him about the situation in the region with the shelling and other issues. Thank you. The situation is more or less calm in our region. Anyway, there was the artillery working at night, mainly our artillery. So we responded to Russian occupiers. As for the evacuation, we don't see a major flow of people from Kherson. So, of course, no one returns to Kherson now, and this is a proper decision because it is rather unsafe in our city, unfortunately. So you mentioned that there was mainly our artillery working. So what is the situation with the Russian shelling? What is the situation in the residential areas in Kherson, including the Ostrov district, the island district? This is not a serious threat. This is a lethal threat, and we've been talking about that since the first day of the occupation. So we advise to leave Kherson if there is such a possibility. There are no safe places, and island district is heavily shelled because it is a bit far, it is further from the central part of the city. So that's why we do not recommend to stay in that area. But still, some citizens reside there together with their children, and of course, they have the issues with the power supply because not all engineers can reach that place because this is just unsafe. And the situation is worse there comparing to other districts of Kherson. But anyway, in other districts, the strikes are also quite frequent, especially we had a difficult situation on the weekend. Yesterday, the situation more or less stable, and we are able to respond with our artillery. Now I would like to give floor to my colleague. There is the question to the humanitarian situation in the city. Let alone the island district, what is the situation with gas, power, water supply in the rest of Kherson? Can you say that all the citizens of Kherson have access to this supply? No, of course not. Because there are the damages to the infrastructural facilities, especially when it comes to gas pipelines, because they are outside of the buildings, and almost every day we have damages of gas pipeline. And we cannot say that the situation is critical in the city because there is water and power supply, and there is still heating. But some of the block of flats, for some of the block of flats, it is impossible to resume the supply of heat, for example. But we cannot say that we have a humanitarian catastrophe because the drugstores, the shops are open. There are also the dissemination point, and the water supply is also efficient. My colleague has a question. Dmytro, I'm really happy to see you here because we'll read your Facebook page to understand the situation, first in Mykolaiv and now in Kherson. Tell us, please. Can you share the numbers? How many people, how many civilians are still there in Kherson? And the second question, you've mentioned that Russians use their artillery to attack the city. What other weaponry do they use? Are there some prohibited weapons that they use to attack the occupied Kherson? As for the number of the population which is still there in Kherson, there is no secret, around 20% of the general population. This is less than 60,000 persons. Before the full-scale invasion, there were around 330,000 people residing, and around 100,000 people they left during the occupation, and the rest left after the liberation. So they are mainly socially vulnerable groups that cannot evacuate, or some patriots that they survived the occupation, and they say that shelling is not that dangerous as the occupation. And I actually can agree with them, because when to choose between occupation and shelling, I would choose shelling, because when it comes to the occupation, you're always in danger, especially if you're pro-Ukrainian, because every day you can be detained, tortured, or killed. Because the shelling isn't, under the shelling you have at least some choice. As for the second question, please remind me about the types of weapons. They use two main algorithms for shelling. They use them in parallel. As for the first, they use the multiple launched missile system just to cover the whole of the city, district by district, every day. And as for the second one, they just attack the infrastructure facilities, mainly hospitals and other energy facilities, as well as crowded places. So this is the system of shelling they use. And just to protect the city from the weapons they use, starting from mortars, tanks, and the high-caliber artillery, we need to repel them from the left bank for at least 100 kilometers, which is quite difficult at the moment. But please don't expect that after we succeed, the situation would improve, because they will use the more powerful systems like Pion S-300 Tornado, as they did for Mykolaiv. So we need just to hope that we will be able to compel them for the distance of around 200 kilometers to say that Kherson is safe. And as Mykolaiv now, because a lot of people return to Mykolaiv, and Mykolaiv is crowded now. So we can see now that Mykolaiv is more or less safe now. Thank you. We have one more question. On the one hand, we understand that people should know where they can get humanitarian aid. But on the other hand, we remember, as it was in late December, that one of the dissemination points was shelled, and the volunteer of Red Cross in Ukraine was killed. So how to preserve the balance of necessity and safety? So how you manage to do this? This is a very difficult question, and the Red Cross is one of the facilities which is most heavily shelled by the Russians. And after the volunteer died, who was 32-year-old, and the man who was 70 years old, who was back there getting aid, they attacked the office of the Red Cross once again, destroying it completely. There are around 18 venues where people can get humanitarian aid all the time, and there is no Solomon decision for this situation, because there are a lot of people and we need to provide humanitarian aid. And that's why this is up for people to decide if they're ready to risk to get that humanitarian aid. So we call for people, starting from the first days after the liberation of Kherson, to leave the city if people have such a possibility, because we cannot ensure safe dissemination of humanitarian aid. Dmytro, this is once again me. I have the next question. You say that they target the office of the Red Cross in Ukraine on purpose. I just would like to ask you once again that the enemy knows where the venues are and that they attack the places that disseminate humanitarian aid and purpose. They not only target the national points, the national organizations, but also international organizations, because there is no rules for the war that they just follow. That's why there is criminal proceedings initiated, because they attack peaceful quarters, the places where a lot of civilians are, and in generally there are no safe places in Kherson. They just attack the infrastructure just to attack it, because it is even beyond terrorism acts, because there is the terrorist attacks. They have at least some goals, but they just shell just to shell. Thank you. If there are no other questions, we will finalize our briefing. Dmytro, thank you for finding time to join us today. We will be glad to see you here again, hopefully with the good news about Kherson. Please keep safe. Thank you. That was the last briefing for today. So please stay tuned. We will find more interesting stories for you.